Salutations, everybody. That's right, I'm doing another one of these videos. Christmas is coming, gentlemen, and in order to mark the soon-to-come passing of a new year, I'm returning to my old format and doing another one of these classic, weird, are they video essays or commentary? I don't know, one of the two. Comic books. Graphic novels. It might be a bit difficult to tell, but I bloody love comics. Always have, always will. I think comics are one of the highest forms of art there is. And one particular genre of comic books that I absolutely love is superheroes. I absolutely bloody love superheroes. This is the genre that I'm most passionate about, and I just love everything about it. I love the costumes, the creative storytelling, the personalities, the powers, the whole shebang. However, it may shock you to hear that there is an individual comic book writer out there that does not express my sentiment for the love of superheroes, and in fact, severely dislikes them, sees them as an insult to comic books, views superheroes as nothing more than a childish fantasy that should be discarded and avoided at all costs. Who am I talking about? That's right, Alan Moore! I'm joking, obviously. I'm talking about Garth Ennis. That bloody... Ooh! Words cannot express my utter disdain for Garth Ennis and his whole bloody career in comics. It's bloody awful. So for those who are unaware, Garth Ennis is a very controversial comic book writer that's been on the landscape for quite a while now. He did some stuff for DC. I think he did a little bit for Marvel, The Punisher, if I'm aware. And then he sort of went off and did his own thing. And my word, his work... Oh, bloody, it's making my blood boil just thinking about it. His body of work contains some of the most repugnant, repulsive, and disgusting comic books that have ever seen the light of day. Ever. Garth Ennis is my greatest foe. And would you like to know why? As I mentioned earlier, I bloody love superheroes. But does Garth Ennis share that sentiment? Absolutely not. In fact, he hates superheroes to the highest extent that it could be possible to hate superheroes. He's like the Am of the comic book industry. He hates superheroes so much, to such an extent that I have never seen before. It is utterly mind-boggling. But why does Mr. Ennis have such a firm distaste for superheroes? Well, based on what I've heard, he dislikes superheroes for one apparent reason.
Well, I personally think that superheroes are pretty unrealistic all the while. You know, you don't see a bloke dressed in blue spandex flying across the air, fighting a massive robot cyborg lizard in the streets of New York. You don't see that happen.
But as you can probably tell, Garth Ennis does not like superheroes because he apparently views them as unrealistic. Like, he thinks the whole idea of these costume crusaders going on fun adventures, battling space gods and costume villains and having all kinds of fun adventures, he thinks that's some kind of childish juvenile fantasy. And to be honest, I think he's missed what the point of superheroes is. Like, you don't pick up like a really cool Superman comic to see Superman struggling financially, trying to pay his taxes in the cost of living crisis. Like I say, I really like superheroes because of how fun and imaginative they are. And while applying realistic consequences does add to their charm and makes their stories a lot better, if you focus too much on making them realistic, it takes away, what makes them cool. And apparently, Garth Ennis doesn't like that for some reason. Though I think it's been established that Garth Ennis really doesn't like superheroes. But the question is, how does he deal with this hatred? Does he just go on Reddit and makes like 1,000-word angry posts about how much he dislikes them? Does he just silently keep it to himself and write about things that he actually likes? No, absolutely not. Garth Ennis makes a whole friggin' manifesto about how much he doesn't like superheroes by depicting superheroes in the worst manner possible, and then proceeds to have them get violently murdered by a bunch of blokes in trench coats. What am I talking about, you may ask? I am talking about, I think, what might be the worst comic book I have ever read in my life. That's right, The Boys. Now, I've read a lot of pretty terrible comics in my lifetime, but none of them come close to the absolute horror that is the original Boys comic. While the series on Amazon is, it's okay, it has its moments, but it's still pretty horrendous overall, the comic, oh my god, the comic is flippin' awful. See, it's not enough for Garth Tennis to hate superheroes as a whole. Nah. He has to ruin them for everyone by making superheroes act in the most cartoonishly evil and depraved manner possible. Homelander says the actual N-word 4 times in the comic, I think. Maybe less, maybe more, but still. What? Garth Ennis has got some damn nerve calling other people's work childish when The Boys is honestly one of the most childish and juvenile comics I've ever seen. It's got no nuance, no style, nothing of any interest. It is literally just gore, violence, swearing, gore, violence, swearing, swearing, gore, violence, swearing. That is literally all it is. It's just shock, horror, gore, depraved, violent. It's literally, it's nothing, pretty much. It's just nothing but meaningless violence and swearing and utter just bad. It's just bad content, really. It's just bad content. Now, much like the Amazon show, while The Boys comics does have some moments of stability, primarily through the interactions with the other characters, the calm interactions with the other characters, where they're just talking about like the stock prices at Vought or something and like their business strategies. Those moments are okay. Garth Ennis does have some skill in writing dialogue, but all of that is overshadowed by how utterly depraved and nonsensical the rest of it is. I feel bad for the guy who had to draw all of the art. I don't want to get into like the actual content of The Boys itself because it's pretty terrible, but all I can say is I just feel bad for the artist that had to draw some guy farting in another guy's face. I hope he got paid millions, to be honest. But I feel as though what makes The Boys a truly horrendous product of fiction is not just the writing, it's because it's not a product of love or passion, it is a product of pure spite. And if there's one thing that you mustn't have while writing a story, in my opinion, it's spite. For my 1 or 2 regular viewers out there, you would know that I don't like this anime called Keijo. I think it's bloody stupid and way too ridiculous to be taken seriously, and the writing is a bit all over the place. But do I make a massive Keijo fan comic where all the characters brutally die in horrific fashions, and it calls anyone who likes Keijo mentally disabled? No, of course not. Because I'm not a bloody idiot. Like I said, the impression that I got from The Boys comic is Garth Ennis isn't just hating on superheroes, he wants to ruin the genre of superheroes for literally everybody else. And I think that is... I don't think that's the right approach to have to the things you hate or to writing in general. Like, I feel like you should write about things you love, because if you're trying to write about something that you actively hate with all your heart, then you're not going to produce a good result. You're just going to have this horrible, spite-filled mess. But if you write about something that you like, you might have a good result. And it'll be better for you because you're actually writing about something that you like as opposed to something you don't like. Spite is the one thing that you most definitely shouldn't have when writing a comic. And unfortunately for The Boys, it is the one thing that it has an absolute abundance of, besides swearing and violence and gore and all that other horrible stuff. But it doesn't end there, lads. Oh no! Garth Ennis has made plenty of other horrible comics in his lifetime. He did another superhero comic called The Pro. I'm definitely not going to get into what The Pro is. Google it when you have the opportunity. And he also did this utterly just... So I think it might be slightly worse than The Boys. It's this comic that I found out about quite recently called Cross. And hearing about it, it actually sounded quite interesting. The whole premise is that there's like this virus going about that puts like a cross on your head and you become the worst version of yourself and you give in to all your like worst attributes and your worst impulses. And I thought to myself, that actually sounds like quite an interesting premise. You could have like a cast of characters, do like an in-depth character study. What could go wrong? Well, guess what? A lot of things went wrong with it. Does Garth Ennis utilise this unique premise to tell an interesting story and an in-depth character study at all? Nope. From what I have seen of Garth Ennis's work, he seems to place a lot of importance on being extreme and edgy and controversial. But here's the thing, if you try and focus on too much on trying to shock and gross out the audience, you're kind of forgetting to tell a good story as well. There are plenty of good stories out there that have pretty shocking moments, but those shocking moments are mostly overshadowed by how good the writing is, and unfortunately, based on what I've seen, Garth Ennis doesn't have that. He just has these shocking moments, and that's That's pretty much all you're getting, really. But I have heard that Garth Ennis has made a few good comics. Like, apparently the stuff he did on Punisher was really good, and another solo series he did called Preacher was apparently really good, and he did the series for DC that he made called Hitman was really good. But in the case of Hitman, he didn't have full control over it because he was working at DC, and they were all like,
Listen, Garth, I know you love your violence and your gore, but we got sponsors to think about. We're not gonna get any sponsors from Colgate if you have your main character say the N-word and disavow a guy for the 15th time, you know.
So because he was under the watchful eye of DC editorial while making Hitman and most likely The Preacher, I get the impression if he had total control over both of those works and all the other things that he's done, it would have turned into the exact same horrible, like, disgusting stuff that The Boys was, to be honest. I might be wrong, I haven't read The Preacher or Hitman, but I would imagine that if he did have full control over it, yeah, it would be pretty bad. So, in summary, The Boys is the worst thing I've ever read, and Garth Ennis sucks. And while some may argue that Garth Ennis does have some skills as a writer, and yeah, it's clear that he does, sadly though, he kind of tarnished the reputation of the genre that I really, really love, and for that, I will always, always deeply despise him for that. And Garth Ennis, if you're watching this, if through some insane astronomical miracle this video ends up coming to you, I will find you, and I will fight you. A quick disclaimer, just in case any Garth Ennis fans come after me and try to kill me. My word isn't law, this is all just what I think. I'm just a big loser making videos in his room. You don't have to take my word for it, this is just purely what I think.